Alrighty guys, so let's briefly go over the lab safety rules for this lab. Number one thing is you're going to want to wear goggles at all times. We are going to be working with a compound called sodium hydroxide. See it right here. It's going to be in a container like this. And this is an irritant, so if it gets in your eyes, it can permanently damage them. So just make sure you're wearing goggles at all times. Okay, second thing, I'm going to show you guys sodium hydroxide. It is a solid, and so you'll be working with a solid chemical. Hopefully you guys can see the inside of that. But if this gets into contact with your skin at any point during the lab, whether it's when you're weighing it or when you're moving it around, you want to go to the closest sink and just rinse it off with water. You don't need to use any soap or anything like that. Just run it in water for maybe about a minute or two, and then after that you should be good to go. If you find yourself feeling any residual effects, if it's tingly on the spot where you came into contact with the sodium hydroxide, make sure you talk to your instructor and they'll help you take care of that. Okay? Alright, number 3, you're going to be working with glassware during your lab, so you'll be working with things made of glass. So just make sure that you're careful when you're working with them. Make sure you carry them with 2 hands so you don't drop them. Make sure that you're not messing around so that you accidentally hit it and make it fall. And most importantly, make sure it doesn't fall off the countertops. Okay, so that's going to be the first 3. And then the last safety rule is when you guys are working with your compounds, you're going to see a waste container next to the scales. If you, for whatever reason, need to get rid of your chemicals, whether you are done with your experiment or whether you just need to dump it at the very end, or you took out too much from the container, make sure you put it into the waste container. Do not drain things down the sink unless your instructor has explicitly told you to do that. Okay, so make sure everything goes into the waste container. Alright guys, now when you guys are at the scales, you are going to start by preparing the scale to weigh your NaOH. First thing you're going to do is you're going to just press that button and your scale should turn on. When it's 0, it is ready to go. Okay, you're going to weigh your compound on something called a weigh boat. It's just like this plastic little bowl here, and you're going to put it on top of the scale, and what you're going to do is you're going to press 0 in order to zero it out. Okay, and then once it's stable, you're ready to add your compounds onto the scale. Okay, so the 2 things you want to do is you want to put the weigh boat on the scale, and then you're going to zero the scale. Okay, so you're going to want to keep in mind 3 things as you transfer the NaOH from the container, your chemical container, onto the weigh boat. Okay, number 1 is you want to use a scooper or some kind of spoon at all times. You don't want to just pour it directly onto the weigh boat. You want to use something to move the compounds to your weigh boat. Okay. Second thing, once you open your container, so let me open it for us. Okay. When you open your container, you're going to want to tilt the NaOH towards you so that it's easier to scoop. Obviously, don't dump it in your direction, but you're going to want to tilt it so it's closer to you. Okay, and then afterwards, you're just going to want to move very little at a time, okay? 1 piece at a time. So you're going to get some of the NaOH. Hopefully you guys can see that that is very little. And then you're going to put it on very slowly onto your scale, okay? And then as you transfer it very, very slowly onto your scale, you're going to see the weight, the mass move. It's going to change, and you want to add a very little at a time, okay? Now, one thing I do want to mention is that let's say you took out too much, okay? You took out too much NaOH, more than you wanted to, okay? You are not going to take compounds from your weigh boat. So once you take it out, you are not going to take it and then put it back into the container, okay? Once the chemicals are out of this container, you do not put them back in, okay? If we see you do that, you are going to get an automatic 0 on the lab, and you will be banned from all further labs because you are ruining everybody else's experiment that uses this compound afterwards. You're basically making this entire container useless for everyone else, and that's a pretty selfish thing to do. So if you take out more than you need, what you're going to do is just slowly measure out the amount that you don't need. So let's say, for example, I wanted to get to 1 gram. I'm going to take some of the compounds out, and I'm going to put it into the waste container. Okay, so whatever you don't need, you're going to put into the waste container. So let me take out some more. I want to get it exactly to 1 gram. Okay, so I got to take out a little bit more still. So we're going to slowly move it. So you're going to see that this can be kind of a slow process. But now that it's exactly at 1 gram, okay, you're going to dump whatever you don't need into the waste container. Again, do not put it back into the original container, okay? Now that you're done weighing out your NaOH, you're going to be moving on to your lab station. Now, before you move back to your lab station, let me just make a quick note. Make sure that your container is completely closed, okay? Do not leave your cap open. You wanna make sure it's closed completely. I mean, obviously don't make it super tight so the next person cannot open it, but you want to make sure that your container is closed completely. Now, the reason why this is super important is because NaOH, sodium hydroxide, absorbs water from the air. It's very hygroscopic, which means it loves water. It loves water so much, it'll take water out from the air, and that's another way you can ruin the compounds in here. So this is a very sensitive chemical. So this is another way that you can get banned from future labs. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can leave this open, but please don't. Just volunteer not to do the labs. Make sure you guys completely close it so that you don't ruin the NaOH inside of it. Okay? All right, guys, now you're ready to go back to your lab station and finish up the experiment. Now, before you leave the scales, there's 3 things you want to double check before you go. First and foremost, make sure your NaOH container is completely closed. Second thing, you want to make sure that your spoon or scooper is on a paper towel. Basically, when you got there, you should have found it on a paper towel. Just put it back on. And then after you pick up your weigh boat and you go back to your lab station, before you go, make sure you grab a paper towel. Make sure you very gently, you don't want to push down hard because then you'll ruin the scales. Just very gently brush off the top of the scale so that it's clean. If you spilled anything for whatever reason, make sure you guys wipe down the lab station before you go. You want to make sure the scale area is extremely clean, cleaner than the way that you left it. Okay, so those are the 3 things that you want to keep in mind before you leave the scales. All right, now that you're back at your lab station, you are ready to make your solution. Now, when you get to your lab station, you should see that there are 3 things at your lab station, okay? First thing is this little squirt bottle right here. It should be filled with water. Okay, an empty 250 milliliter beaker, and you're also going to need a 250 milliliter NA or volumetric flask. This is where you're gonna be making your NaOH solution. Okay, so you have weighed your NaOH and you've brought it over, and so now we are ready to make our solution. Okay, so what you're gonna do is you're going to open up your flask, and then you're going to transfer the NaOH in your weigh boat into your flask. Okay, now the proper way to transfer the NaOH from the weigh boat to your flask is you're going to want to bend your weigh boat like this. Don't fold it all the way, but you want to just bend it like this. That way it makes a little nice little runway for your NaOH to go into your flask. And you're just going to slowly tap it, just very slowly, patiently, softly. You don't want to whack it, but you're just going to slowly tap it. You're going to see that the NaOH starts moving. It might move a little bit slow, but you want to move the NaOH solution very slowly into your flask. Now you want to get as much of it out as possible. So you're going to tap it, and that's how you're going to move it into the flask. Okay, now you're going to notice that there are some pieces of NaOH still on the weigh boat, and if you want to get that remainder off and you're tapping and it's not coming off, what you're going to do is just bend it like this, and very gently you're going to use a squirt bottle like that, and that's how you're going to finish up transferring all of the NaOH. So go very slowly. You don't need a lot of water. You don't want to use too much, because if you do, it might overflow and you're going to lose some of your solution. And so you're going to do that, and there you go. That should be a clean way to transfer all your NaOH into your solution. If you need to go to the back side, you can go to the back side, just bend it again, and then use the water to transfer anything that's remaining into your flask. Okay, the key is to go slowly, and you want to remove all of it from the weigh boat. So you're going to notice there's only water left in my weigh boat, so that way it's ready to go. Okay, so that is the proper way to transfer NaOH from the weigh boat into the flask. First thing you want to do is you want to fold the weigh boat and tap it. The second thing you want to do is to clean it off with the squirt bottle. All right, now that all of your NaOH is inside of your flask, you're going to finish making the rest of the solution. You're going to see a beaker at your lab station. So what you're going to do is you're just going to go to your nearby sink. You can go to the closest one. and then you're just going to fill it up with water. Okay, then what you're going to do is you're going to slowly add water into your flask from your beaker. It's okay if it spills off the side a little bit, but you just want to make sure you add it very carefully. Okay, you don't want to spill too much, and you want to add very slowly. Okay, now I'm going to talk about why you want to add slowly in just a bit, but you're going to add water until you are almost at the top of the fat part at the bottom of the flask. Okay, so when it starts tapering off like that, so when you're around there, that's when you're good to go to stop. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to notice that there's a line right here at the skinny, the neck part of the volumetric flask. And once the water level gets to the skinny part, that is when you have the solution, the volume that's written on your volumetric flask. So this line indicates when the solution is at 250. So for the remainder, after you add to the top of this wide part, what you're going to do is you're going to get your squirt bottle and just put it on the top. And then you're just going to slowly squeeze to add some water, and then you want to get it to the line. Okay, so you're going to put it into the flask until you get to the line. Now, before we finish up, I do want to mention one thing. If you guys take a look at the water level, you're going to notice there's a little bit of a curve, right? There's a curve at the top of the water level. Okay, you want the bottom of that curve right here. You want that part to be the part that's touching this line. Okay, the bottom of that curve is called a meniscus. You want to write that down for problem number 11. Okay, the bottom of that curve is called a meniscus, and you want that to be the part that touches that line. And that's when you know you are exactly at the volume that you want. So you're going to add very slowly from here. You want to take it slow because you want the exact volume. Okay, and you will be graded on accuracy. And there you go. You got the bottom of the curve touching that line. And that's how you know you've gotten the solution that you want. Now, if you did spill at any point during the experiment, it's all good. Just grab a paper towel and just dry it. I would recommend placing your flask on a paper towel. That way the bottom is dry. All right, now that you have put the water and the solute into your volumetric flask, you are ready to stir it. Now, instead of stirring manually, we're gonna use a nice tool that scientists use, that chemists use in order to stir their solutions well. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your volumetric flask and you're going to take it to a station where your instructor should have these stir plates ready to go. Now, before you place this onto a stir plate, what you're going to do is get a paper towel and just dry off the bottom of your volumetric flask. Okay? After that, you're going to put your volumetric flask on top of your stir plate. Okay? All right, afterwards, you're going to ask your instructor for this little pill-looking thing, okay? This is called a magnetic stir bar, and this is what's going to stir our solution. So once you have your flask on your stir plate, you're just going to just gently drop your stir bar onto the stir plate. After that, you are going to close it. So you're going to put the cap on top of your volumetric flask, and then you're just going to slowly increase the dial, and that's going to stir your solution. Okay, so the 5 steps that you want to follow when you're using this stir plate is: number 1, you want to dry the bottom of your flask. Okay, step 2, you're going to put the flask on top of the stir plate. Step 3, you're going to put the magnetic stir bar in there. And then step 4, you're going to slowly increase the speed. You don't want it going too fast. Okay, and then step 5, when you see that the solute has completely dissolved, so you're just going to keep an eye on it, and when you see that everything has dissolved, that is when you're ready to go. I think my solution's good to go now, so I'm just going to turn off my stir plate, and I am ready to go. Alrighty guys, now you have finished making your solution, so you are ready to clean up. There are 4 things that you need to do to clean up, and so let's go through them. First thing is you're going to talk to your instructor and receive some type of masking tape and a Sharpie to label your volumetric flask for part 2 of this lab. So what you're going to do is you're just going to write your name. Now you don't need to write everybody's name, just know one person's name so you can identify whose it is. So I'm going to write my name, and then you're going to write your block number. So this is going to be, let's say that it's block 1, so I'm going to write block 1. And then after that, you're just going to put the tape, the masking tape, on your volumetric flask. And then you're going to take your volumetric flask to the area where we're going to be storing our solutions. All right, once you take your solution to the area where you're going to be storing them, you're going to ask your instructor to take the magnetic stir bar out. This is the second step for cleaning up. So your instructor is going to use a magnet to take out your magnetic stir bar. So it should look something like this. You won't be doing this part, so don't stress too much. But for whatever reason, if your instructor asks you to do it, this is how you do it. Just use two magnets, one of them to bring the stir bar up, and then the little stick to take it out. And that's how you'll remove your stir bar. So step one was to label your volumetric flask. Step two is to take the magnetic stir bar off, and then you're going to return it to your instructor. Now, so for step three, what you're going to want to do is you're just going to want to make sure your stir plate is clean. So if you need, you can grab a paper towel and just make sure you wipe down the top of your stir plate so it's dry and nice and clean for the next person. And then if you notice that everything is wet here, so you're going to want to go to your lab station, and every place that you worked, you want to make sure you guys wipe it down, make sure everything is clean before you finish up the lab. Okay, once you get your lab station checked, you give the stir bar back to your instructor, then you will get a stamp to verify that you've cleaned up. Make sure you guys keep track of all the things that you worked with. So things like your weigh boat, you want to make sure that you dry that off with a paper towel, and then you're going to return that to your instructor. And then what you're going to do, last step, is you're going to go back to your lab station and set it up exactly the way that you found it for the next group. You want to make sure that there is a 250 milliliter beaker, and there's also a squirt bottle ready to go. So let's recap real quick what you're doing for the cleanup. So step number one, you want to label your volumetric flask. Step number two, you're going to take your volumetric flask to the storing area, and then you're going to ask your instructor to remove the magnetic stir bar. Okay, step three, you are going to get a paper towel and wipe down your stir plate and just your entire lab station in general. Make sure that everything is dry. If you see any wet spots, whether you made that spot or not, you're going to want to dry it off for everybody else. And then step four, you're going to want to make sure that you leave your lab station exactly the way you found it for the next person. So when you went to the lab station, you should have noticed that there was a squirt bottle, there was a beaker, and then you're also going to go to your instructor and get a new volumetric flask. So you're going to get a new volumetric flask and place it for the next person. Okay, you're such a good citizen. Okay, so that's what you're going to be wanting to do as you clean up for the lab. So make sure you follow those 4 things and you'll get the cleanup stamp and get credit for part 1 of the lab.